Welcome back to the Sip My Thoughts podcast. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. Again, if you could, please like, comment, subscribe. I'm on all social media platforms. You can follow me at Sip My Thoughts everywhere. As far as streaming platforms, I'm on all streaming platforms everywhere. You can just search the Sip My Thoughts pod, and my podcast should come right up, and you should be able to find me. It's Friday. Hope everyone is doing well. Hopefully everyone is about to have a great weekend, is about to get out of work, chill, vibe, have a good time, and just relax and enjoy yourselves, man. I know it's been a trying week, depending on what you were looking for in regards to this latest presidential election. I know a lot of people are down in the dumps, frustrated, and feeling hopeless and helpless and things of that nature. But, just continue to persevere, continue to do what it is that you've been doing when things have not gone in your favor. And I just hope that, one day we'll recover from this and get back to continuing to build our communities and doing all the necessary things it is that we do to be successful and things that we're going to continue to do. So it's been a long week, but keep your head up and keep persevering. So this is episode 71, and the title of this episode is 3 Observations Learned from the Young Thug Trial. And Young Thug has officially been home for a week now, and you've seen him make just spot appearances here and there on social media. I know he started tweeting a couple days ago. I think he might have tweeted like twice maybe, and I know that T.I. posted a video of him on Instagram, being with Thug and stuff like that. It's just cool to kind of see him kind of slowly working himself back into the real world and trying to get back to where he was. Who knows what he's doing at this point? I'm sure probably spending time with his family and his kids and things like that, and hopefully he just continues to stay on the straight and narrow so he can continue to thrive and be who he was before he was arrested on May 8th of 2022. But for those of you all who may not have been watching the trial or may not have been tuned in as intently as I was, Young Thug reached up to 154 days inside of the Fulton County Jail. And watching the trial was really eye-opening for me. So this episode, I wanted to talk about 3 things that specifically stuck out to me. And in all honesty, I think it's something that can help you guys. Cause I'm sure not everyone watched this trial. You should have, just based on the implications that this trial could have brought forth. Like if you're a lover of music, like I am, the implications could have been serious in regards to the First Amendment and how rappers could express themselves and the things they could say, and if their music and their lyrics were going to be used against them, whether in like a criminal situation, criminal case, anything. So I consider this trial to be the O.J. Simpson trial of like the early 90s. I know everybody was tuned in because it was said that O.J. had proceeded, or he was considered bigger than just a black person at that time. Like he had transcended his blackness, and he was just a cultural figure and a cultural icon to where people could relate to who he was and just how he moved and everything that he did. So he was like a larger than life figure. To me, this Young Thug trial is exactly that. Not on the same scale, but in regards to the implications that it could have had on the hip hop music industry, rap in general, I think it would have been huge. So these are my thoughts. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. I know that, again, if you didn't watch the trial, some of this stuff may escape you, but I think the way that I break it down, I make it relatable and something that is easily digestible and understood. So again, episode 71, 3 observations learned from Young Thug's trial. Young Thug is home, and people were more than elated to see him freed from the shackles of the Fulton County Jail, along with a trial he participated in for a total of 154 days. In case you have been living under a rock these last 2 years, Young Thug, whose real name is Jeffery Williams, was arrested in May of 2022 after he was indicted under the Racketeering, Influence, Corrupt Organization Act. Thug was accused of leading a gang, YSL, which stands for Young Slime Life, according to the state of Georgia, which supposedly wreaked havoc across the city of Atlanta in an alleged gang war with If Gang or Inglewood families, a version of YFN and YFN Lucci, who Thug has been seen on social media going back and forth with. So basically, the Inglewood families is a blood gang here, and I'm not sure if they're necessarily saying that YFN Lucci is the leader of Inglewood families, but at one point, he was thought to be a If gang member, allegedly. Yak Gotti, an alleged member of YSL, took a picture standing on top of YFN Lucci's Mercedes-Benz convertible. I forgot what year this was, but if you see this picture floating around social media, you see Yak Gotti standing on the trunk of YFN Lucci's blue Mercedes-Benz, and I think they were at Lenox Mall or something. YFN Lucci was in the mall shopping, but Yak Gotti was standing on top of his car, taking a picture and throwing a middle finger up in the picture. So that's what I'm referring to here. Yak Gotti, an alleged member of YSL, took a picture standing on top of YFN Lucci's Mercedes-Benz convertible. Lucci was also stabbed inside of the Fulton County Jail by an alleged member of YSL. So are there real issues between Thug and Lucci? It's not far-fetched to reasonably assume the two are not fond of each other, leading to dissension to two possible leaders of these sets. Honestly speaking, I'm not a huge fan of Young Thug's music, but I was happy to see him being freed from jail after taking a plea deal. Why, you might ask? I'm a fan of black men getting fair trials, especially when the consequences could lead to long-term prison sentences. Now, I do believe in accountability, and if a crime was committed, I believe consequences should follow. However, if you arrest and accuse someone of committing a crime, the burden is on the prosecution to prove what you're alleging can be proven. As someone who has watched this trial from its early stages to now, I have learned three things that I can point to that I learned from this trial. Let's talk about the first. All skin folk are not kinfolk. Let me say that again. All skin folk are not kinfolk. And let's talk about it. Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis has found herself in a couple of high-profile situations. She decided to sue former president, now president-elect, Donald Trump for his election crimes in the 2020 election, where he called Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to, quote, find votes, end quote, so that he could win the state of Georgia that election year. She indicted him on RICO charges as well, and it remains to be seen if he would ever step foot inside of a Fulton County courthouse. In her alleged prosecution of Trump, some of her skeletons were released from her closet, as it was unveiled that one of the attorneys assisting her in her quest to prosecute the former president she was romantically involved with. Attorney Nathan Wade's ex-wife alerted one of the defendant's attorneys that Willis and Wade were involved in a romantic relationship, and he was the highest paid lawyer working the case with her. It was revealed they went on trips together, obviously dined at various restaurants, which in my opinion was not a conflict of interest, but a judge decided that if the district attorney's office wanted to move forward with their prosecution of the former president, Wade would have to recuse himself from the case, which he ultimately did willingly. In my opinion, what people do in their bedroom and who they date is no one's business outside of the two consenting parties. I was fully on board with her while she was facing public scrutiny for this action because of what I just stated. Now, would I have dated someone I am trying a high-profile case with? Probably not. But she chose to, and the issue was quickly dissolved. However, what she and her office were attempting to do to Young Thug seemed juvenile and criminal. In an attempt to use lyrics to build a case against him, you saw just how unsuccessful they were when presenting the trial. If you watched the trial, as I did, it was clear to see that they were trying to send Young Thug down the road with bare minimum evidence. You had a biased judge in Judge Ural Glanville who did his best in assisting the state in their attempted prosecution of Thug while admonishing the state here and there to show that he wasn't favoring one side over the other. But it was clearly seen. He helped the state suppress evidence that could have shown that claims being made by the state did not align with the facts of the case. There were so many blatant attempts to shift this trial in the balance of the state that it wasn't even funny. And to be doing this on national television is the biggest crime. Thinking you could railroad a man in front of the entire world is baffling to me. I just didn't understand that. You also had the prosecution reading lyrics that Young Thug never even wrote and began reciting them in front of a jury and at his plea hearing. I truly believe had he been found guilty of being a gang leader, the entire world would have shown up in Atlanta to protest. It's troubling to say the least, and I am not exaggerating when I say these things. They wanted to make an example out of him, and I truly look at Fonnie Willis a lot differently, despite her attending the HBCU as I did. Growing up, you see prominent black people in positions of power, and you aspire to be like them and to get to where they are. While you may never get a chance to meet these people, their example is more than enough to aspire to. But in my estimation, Fonnie Willis did this specifically, Fonnie Willis did this specifically to say she got a conviction and to add notches to her belt, to say that she did something she really did not do. She does not appear to be seeking justice, but more so fame, and that's so unfortunate being someone in her position. She would obviously not admit to that opinion, but anyone who watched and saw the young thug, saw the young thug was being railroaded by the previous judge in the state. Another reason I could say this is because the previous Fulton County District Attorney, Paul Howard, declined not to indict this case because there just wasn't enough concrete evidence the state could have used to prosecute. There wasn't enough evidence to prosecute Thug and YSL, which is why the former district attorney did not choose to prosecute this case. However, Fonnie Willis took that same evidence and thought she would do something differently, and thus far, she has not been successful as plea deals have been reached with a good deal of defendants except 2. As far as those 2 who were severed from the case to be tried individually, a total of 14 or more of those defendants exist. Willis is not kinfolk. She now appears to be seeking fame and notoriety instead of accurately convicting those actively committing crimes in Fulton County. And again, just watching the trial and seeing what the state has been doing, to me, it wasn't really a shock that this was coming. I didn't necessarily accept plea deals, though. I actually thought that the trial would end in a mistrial. That eventually came, but it wasn't going to be a mistrial with prejudice. The judge offered a mistrial, but she would not offer it with prejudice, meaning if it was dismissed with prejudice, Young Thug, and let's just say YSL wasn't gang, just based on what the state was saying. If the trial was dismissed without prejudice, Young Thug and YSL could never be found in a court again for this specific act, for the RICO Act. So the feds couldn't come in and pick it up. And if I'm wrong, someone correct me on that. But the state absolutely could not come in and try Young Thug and YSL. Now, I think the Fed, being that the feds are a separate entity, maybe they could have. Not sure that they would have, but it was definitely a possibility, though. So I'll say that. But yeah, I mean, Fonnie Willis, she's looking a lot different in the light to people these days, just based on this one specific trial. And I truly believe that everyone who watched this trial isn't a Young Thug fan. Like I said, I feel like most people who were tuning in because they're hip hop fans, they're rap fans. It's Atlanta. I mean, they call this Black Hollywood. Obviously, Young Thug is a prominent figure. He's a public figure. So there's obviously public interest in what's going to happen to him. And people are getting a chance to learn about the perceived evidence that the state had that they wanted to put forth as their reason for bringing serious charges such as a RICO against Young Thug. But again, with people watching the trial and seeing what's happening and what's going on, you could really tell that there wasn't a lot of evidence to prove any of the stuff that they were trying to say and put up as facts that either Young Thug was involved in, things that Young Thug did, all of this type of stuff. So for me, I truly look at her differently now because it's kind of hard not to, just based on what she's done, how she's trying to put this forward before the state. And I also need to try to find a recent interview that she did because she was trying to make it seem as if Young Thug taking a plea deal was a conviction. Like she wants to purport that as a conviction, and I don't think that it necessarily was. But again, it's just her. It's just not a good look. It's really not a good look. I'm about to pull up a story and I'll play this for you all so you can hear it and listen for yourselves so you can see what I'm talking about. But it's just how smug she is about the plea deal and everything that happened. So check this out.
Since rapper Young Thug was released from jail, 2 defendants now remain on trial in the case. Shannon Stillwell and DeMonte Kendrick rejected the state's plea offers last week. Today, jurors heard testimony from an Atlanta rapper who performed with the defendants, the medical examiner, and a police detective.
New at 5, only Channel 2 Action News is hearing from Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis. about the dramatic conclusion to the gang racketeering case against rapper Young Thug last week. Channel 2 investigative reporter Mark Winnie's live inside Fulton County Courthouse. And Mark, you actually asked the district attorney if it was worth all the trouble.
You know, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office says this is the grand jury room where the YSL indictment was returned against Young Thug and others, where the criminal prosecution began. And now she's talking about the way his case ended, though the YSL case itself is not over. Any regrets? Was it worth all the trouble?
It's always worth the trouble. The reality is, as you know, I have aggressively prosecuted gang violence, and there is no one above or below the law.
Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis says though she did not agree on a deal for a plea with attorneys for Jeffery Williams, better known as megastar hip-hop artist Young Thug, she's choosing not to publicly voice whether she agrees or disagrees with the sentence. Fulton Superior Court Judge Paige Reese Whitaker.
Sentencing was in the hands of Judge Whitaker.
Handed down after Williams entered a non-negotiated plea in which he pled guilty to every charge he faced in the YSL case, except for two to which he pled nolo contendere, or no contest, which he says is similar to a guilty plea, except when it comes to civil lawsuits. You poured a lot of resources, took a lot of flack on this case.
You shouldn't be the district attorney if you're not willing to take flack. The reality is the world has been caught up with one defendant, but we indicted 28 defendants. 14 of those defendants are now disposed of cases. We have 14 more defendants to go, and so we are going to continue to pursue justice in that case.
Ms. Willis says though Young Thug exited the Fulton County Jail soon after his plea in a car driven by one of his attorneys, he had already done a substantial amount of time in jail while awaiting or going through his trial.
He's been in jail almost 3 years, so that is not a walk in the park.
She says there is room for accountability in the complicated sentence involving 5 years commuted time served, followed by 15 years probation, to be followed by a, quote, backloaded 20-year prison term, which will also be commuted to time served if he successfully completes the probation, which is loaded with lots of special conditions.
Hope springs eternal that he will do well, because if not, he's going to land himself in prison for another 20 years.
The DA says video from gang murder cases unrelated to Williams we reported on last week underscores that gangs are a major driver of crime here. Now, the DA's office says Atlanta police crime stats show some key violent crime categories are down as of October 7th compared to roughly the same time in 2022, and that aggressive prosecution of gang members is a key reason why. Reporting live inside the Fulton County Grand Jury Room, Mark Winnie, Channel 2 Action News.
I want us to pay specific attention to words. One of the things that you learn early on as a journalist is to be very sure and be very mindful about the words that you use, because words have meaning. Oftentimes, journalists stand alone as their own specific brand, but most times they work for news organizations, right? So there are things, words, phrases that should not be used because of the fact that a negative connotation can be attached to those specific types of words or phrases. And I wonder if you guys paid attention to what Fonnie Willis said that I just heard. She said the world is caught up on one defendant, but they have indicted 28 of those, right? The next thing that came out of her mouth, she said 14 of those have been disposed. Now, that may not mean anything to you as a listener, right? But when you dispose of something, I'm sure that we're all intelligent, but when you dispose of something, for an example, we all pay taxes, right? So when you pay taxes, part of your taxes, just say, if you're a homeowner, right? You pay taxes to the city for garbage collection. When a garbage man comes to your home, comes to your neighborhood, their job is to dispose of what? Their job is to dispose of the trash that you have in bins outside of your home. They then pick that trash up and they throw it into a garbage truck. That garbage truck then makes its way to a landfill, and then that is where the garbage is ultimately disposed of. So I just used the word disposed. Well, she used the word first, but I'm just using it in the context. And let's say she didn't even mean it like this, right? But this is why you have public relations professionals. You have people who help you and assist you along the way as a public figure or as a public official in regards to things, words, and phrases that you should and should not use, simply based on the fact of, again, words having meanings, the different connotations attached to words. Your Bible tells you that there is power in the tongue. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. So you should be careful about the words and phrases that you use, right? Even your parents, as you're growing up and you're learning, right? They tell you not to say certain things, not to be cussing, right? Just little stuff like that. So when you hear the word dispose, she should have known better, in my opinion. And maybe I'm reaching. I don't personally think so. When you say 14 of those have been, she said specifically, 14 are disposed cases. There are human beings involved in those cases. You shouldn't necessarily, in my opinion, you shouldn't be using the term disposed, because does that mean you're throwing these men away? You throwing these individuals away? Is that what it is that you're doing? Is that what your office specifically does when it's prosecuting cases? Your job isn't to dispose of a case. Your job is to try a case. Your job is to bring factual evidence and a basis that these men or women have committed said crimes, and then at that point they go before a judge. You prove your case as a state, the defense proves their case, and then the judge is the ultimate determiner of what happens in regards to sentencing and things of that nature. So for her to say disposed of, to me, that is really telling, because you're not disposing of anything. That's not your specific job. Your job is to prosecute and investigate crimes and then allow the court to do what it's supposed to do. So that's just my 2 cents there. But again, as a journalist, we're always taught to be careful about the words that we use and the phrases that we use, because they can be taken out of context. Anything can be. Society is a lot more sensitive today than it ever has been. If we as journalists have to be ever so careful about the things that we say, wouldn't you think that the person that you're paying your tax dollars to should do the same? Again, I personally have a sour taste in my mouth for Fani Willis and who she is and who she purports herself to be. Again, when she was going through the thing when she was trying to prosecute the former president, and then the attorney came along and it revealed who she was dating and what type of money he made and stuff like that. And, that stuff is out of pocket type of stuff for me. Like, that's not something that the public should know. That's not something that the public should even care about. The things that you should be concerned about are your tax dollars being used in the ways in which they are supposed to be used. And if that is being done, whatever type of personal relationship someone has with another individual, that's not our business. What somebody is doing in their bedroom, it's not our business. Where people take trips to, it's not our business. As long as they are using the tax dollars in the way in which they are supposed to be used, then that is A-OK with me. And again, I had no issue with her in regards to that. So I didn't really have an issue with her on that. I was on her side, and I totally understood that. But just seeing the way that she has allowed the state to proceed in this trial and have allowed them to just do whatever it is that they wanted to do with the flimsy evidence that they had or supposedly had for Thug was just put a sour taste in my mouth. So all skin folk ain't kinfolk. That was one of the things that I learned. Let's get into the second thing. And the second thing is something that I've recently learned watching this trial. Like, it's just the fabric of our society. It's just the fabric of our being. It affects us in all aspects of our lives, even in the justice system. And with it infiltrating the justice system the way that it has, I find it to be really and hugely dangerous. Let's talk about capitalism. So it is not lost on me that if Thug did not have influence and access to substantial money, this case could have gone totally different for him. And that to me highlights a larger issue with the justice system. First of all, when you encounter the system, you're entering an endless maze designed to keep you turning corners continuously to get to your ultimate destination of freedom. Even the attorney said as much in the presser after Young Thug was freed from jail. And I want to play that for you right now here as well.
I will say this, I think it is wrong and it needs to be fixed that an innocent man is arrested on May 9th of 2022, is denied bond, and has to plead guilty and nolo to get freedom after 2.5 years in custody. That should not happen. Nobody should be on trial. Juries, think about what they're going through. Nobody should be on trial like this. And if Mr. Williams didn't have the resources, this never happens well for anybody. So I think it's an abuse to answer the AJC's question. I think it's an abuse of the statute of RICO to do this to people.
Is it fair to say you don't believe justice was served today?
I believe that Mr. Williams is home, and I'm delighted. Justice would have been served on May 8th of 2022 if the grand jury no-billed his indictment. That would have been just. And it's wrong to be under investigation. He's been under investigation for 15 years. 15 years by task force of federal government and local government. Think about that. Think about your children doing that. And that's okay. If it's okay with you all, then we should really start moving to another country. I want to thank this and the presumption of innocence, the Brady rules, the ethical rules, they have to survive. Otherwise, we all are victims of this. Anyone can sit in that seat next to Keith Adams. Thank you all so much.
And no one sees it unless you guys do what you do. But I tell you what, there is a whole world of people out there who have watched this trial over the course of the past 2.5 years. The past year that we've actually been in the courtroom trying the case, who are much more educated to how things work, and unfortunately, sometimes how things don't work. Thank you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
I thought that was so powerful. And what the audio that you just heard was by both of Young Thug's attorneys. Attorney Brian Steele, and some people on the internet have dubbed him YSL Steele, and brother attorney Keith Adams. Both amazing attorneys. They did some outstanding work for Young Thug in this case, and he should absolutely be lucky to have both of those attorneys in his corner. But I was watching that news clipping, and I just thought that it was so profound, because what both of them are basically saying is that if the media had not covered this case to the extent and the lengths in which they have, I mean, there are multiple channels dedicated to Young Thug coverage. There are people around the world watching Young Thug's, being tried. Well, when he was, still a part of the case, there were people around the world, tuned in from all over the place, watching and paying attention to what was going on and what was happening, just trying to see, what was going to come of Young Thug in this case. So it's very interesting to see, but that was very interesting to hear, and I just wanted to share that with you all as well. I have another clipping here, but I'll show that momentarily. So yeah, can you imagine how many people are inside those walls who should not be, but do not have the financial means to alleviate them from their situation? Why do you think projects and initiatives such as the Innocence Project exist? It is to provide that immediate relief where it is necessary to give those who may be innocent the opportunity and the chance at freedom. It's funny because it's sad that money is the root of all evil, and the Bible says, "What shall it profit a man to gain the whole world but to lose his own soul?" Also, pay attention to the cat and mouse games that were played by the state. When plea negotiations started, due to the state's incompetence in trying this trial, I am of the opinion that they knew they were not winning the trial. And it was even said that they wanted the big fish, who was Thug. The state initially offered Thug 15 years probation, and he could have been released from prison the same day. However, special conditions enacted by the state in order to trigger the 15 years, no felony, Thug would have had to get on the witness stand and testify to YSL being a gang and him being a gang leader. He also would have likely had to testify against his co-defendants in the trial. Thug obviously refused the plea negotiations. Well, Thug obviously refused, and plea negotiations broke down. So because of that, they were likely pissed that Thug didn't want to testify against his co-defendants. So instead, Fonnie Willis in the district attorney office threw Thug a 45-year prison sentence with 25 years to serve. How did they make such a drastic decision to go from 15 years probation and go home that same day to that amount of time to serve? The state, specifically DA Fonnie Willis, wanted to make an example out of Thug to serve as what can happen to you, no matter who you are, to the city of Atlanta or any other city. If these prosecutors were out for justice like they purport they were, then why in some of the plea deals given, murder charges are being dropped? There could be a couple of reasons. Either you don't have the evidence directly implicating said person in the murder of whoever you are claiming they killed, or you just using them as bait just to include in the indictment aimed at catching the big fish who was Thug. It really is a game of cat and mouse, setting bait and traps you hope the accused will have to fall into just to boast about cleaning up the streets and a high conviction rate. Justice is nowhere involved in the equation because up to this point, absolutely nothing has been proven by the state of Georgia. There's an interview with Young Thug's attorney, Keith Adams, on Court TV where he talks about the notion of gangs committing 80% of the crime in Atlanta. And I want you to listen to his response.
When Fonnie Willis brought this case, she said that this YSL gang, or alleged gang, was responsible for close to 85% or 80% of the crime throughout Atlanta. An incredible claim made the news. What do you make of that claim?
You know, I don't have the explanation for why the district attorney says the things that she says. That was one of the more ridiculous things that we heard. And I guess she wanted to sensationalize the case. The fact is, this was Jeffery Williams and a lot of these individuals charged in this indictment were people who grew up in the Cleveland Avenue area of Atlanta. There's a lot of crime over there, and they're individuals who did individual things. I don't know where she pulled that figure out of. And here's one thing to keep in mind. For the period of time that those individuals charged in the indictment were locked up, crime in the city of Atlanta didn't seem to go down. And so it certainly didn't justify this assertion that she made that, she'd cleaned up the streets by charging these 28 people, most of whom who were charged had already been convicted and served time for the things that were in the RICO indictment.
Right, the underlying crimes that they were using to make the RICO indictment. All right, finally, I'm running out of time here. I'll let you.
So yeah, that's just a little bit of the types of games that's being played with people's lives just for playing politics and just for propping yourself up, putting yourself on a pedestal, talking about what you've done and how you are so tough on crime and gangs and stuff like that. And I live in Atlanta, so for her to be saying that gang violence was the majority of the crime that's being committed here, if you're a resident that lives here, you know that was false. First of all, these people breaking cars around here like it's just a way of life. They breaking cars like they needed to breathe, right? So when there are huge sporting events, and even when there aren't huge sporting events, car break-ins are something that you hear about consistently here. You don't hear about people getting killed here every day. Like, that's not a thing. Crime is still crime, don't get me wrong. And that happens. But personally, you hear more about cars being broken into than you hear people getting killed around here. And I think that's just a fact. Business burglaries, stuff like that. Petty crime, petty theft. Those are the type of things that happen around here. Yes, murder is involved too. But to say 80% of that is committed by gang violence, that's a falsehood. It's not true. And I don't even know why you stand before media and say something like that. And obviously, I think media should have done a better job in fact-checking her and trying to see if that was indeed the case. I don't think anyone around here did that. And that's definitely a shortfall and a shortcoming in regards to the media, because that's something that absolutely should have been looked into. But just like Attorney Adams said right there, like that's not, there's no facts and there's no justification behind that. So again, that's just playing politics and trying to lift yourself up. So it just is what it is. But yeah, the families of these men who were killed are being used as pawns, bringing them to the courtroom to give witness impact statements while simultaneously dropping murder charges against the people you think did it. Where is the justice for the grieving? There isn't. And there has not been any up to this point. Watching this trial shows that if you are someone who is in the streets or committing crimes of any kind, that you better have the financial means to offset and fight the charges and claims made against you. Because if not, you're likely to become consumed and claimed by said maze, and good luck finding your way out of it, because there are just pitfalls all around. So the best thing I can tell you is not even find yourself in the justice system, because You have absolutely no idea who that district attorney is. Politics is a dirty game. It really is. People find themselves in politics, and you would like to think that they have a system of values, morals, and principles and things like that. But oftentimes, you learn that people are just in it for themselves and are in it for the power, what the position can do for them, and not necessarily about what they're supposed to be doing for families and victims of crimes. And I think that is super dangerous, to be putting your belief into someone that you do not know personally, that you can actually speak to their values, their morals, and their principles, who they are, if they're a principled human being or not. And even the most principled human beings are tried and tested by temptation and all other things of this world. I mean, we're all human. Like, we all have vices. But when your vice can affect my life and can land me behind bars for something that I possibly never even did, that has to be frustrating. And it really makes you think about the many multitude of people inside of any jail across this country who is dealing with a corrupt district attorney who is doing things that will make it even more difficult on them, taking away their lives, taking away their freedom, their livelihood, taking them away from their families for unfounded charges and things like that. That is extremely dangerous. But all roads lead back to capitalism. And the third thing that I learned watching this trial, we're all products of our environment. As a plea deal for Cormarvius Nichols was read, I learned that his mother died in prison and his father was shot and killed by the Atlanta Police Department. Also hearing the plea deal of the other Quay in this trial, he grew up in similar situations that led him down a path where he was facing 120 years in prison and multiple consecutive life sentences. Can you imagine standing before a judge and them telling you you were possibly facing 120 years in prison, bro? I'm not even on trial, and when I heard that number, I instantly became sick. So I couldn't imagine actually standing there in that moment, hearing 120 years and multiple life sentences. Like, that is just a disgusting number to hear. Hearing that type of time being read out is unfathomable, that the justice system can throw those types of numbers at people. But the most important thing that I took from this is that no one just goes and starts committing crimes, or do I inherently believe that they want to. Black men typically and unfortunately grow up in unfavorable situations that lead them down a path to destruction, and they spiral. Trauma is a very real thing and affects us in multiple ways. Losing your parents at an early age, having no one to take care of you and guide you through this life, you tend to seek love in places where you shouldn't. Camaraderie and community is important, but the early years of your life eventually molds you and shapes you into the adult you will eventually become if you're lucky enough to survive being a product of your environment and the things being thrown at you. This trial is supposedly about gangs and the violence they inflict on communities. When you learn about the reason for the Crips and the Bloods being created, you learn that they were created during a time where blatant racism was still rampant. So they were used as ways to protect and police their own communities. However, things were still new to them. So while initially their intentions were good for creating said gangs, it became perverted and something they could no longer control. Again, product of my environment. We as a community have to do a better job in raising, rearing, growing, and building our communities in spite of the constant attacks we face. Black people did not create poverty, redlining, financial inequality, all of the constant impediments placed in our paths that create trauma that is passed down to generations. However, one step at a time, we can find ways to protect and love one another. I grew up in a time where if my mama couldn't whip me, her friend could, the neighbor could, or they would give you a stern talking to. I remember going to a baseball tournament with one of my homeboys, And his mom drove us because my mom and dad had to work. And I got to the baseball tournament and, I kind of acted out a little bit, throwing a little temper tantrum and stuff like that. And I'll never forget, like on the drive back, his mom was talking to me like, Tyler, you know better than that. And you know better than that. And I'm going to call your mama in just a moment. I'm going to tell her how you were acting, so-and-so, so-and-so. And I think she even popped me. She got me and my homeboy some food, and I think she popped me too. So, of course, when she dropped me off at home, my mama was outside waiting on me. Thanked her, took me in the house. Now, tell me what happened. Told my mama what happened, what I did. She whooped me real good. And, it was just something that I tried my best not to do again. But that was a time to where there was real trust and love in our communities, where there was enough of us who lived around each other to where we knew each other. We were outside. We were in the community. We were doing things, together. Everybody was comfortable with one another. That was just the type of relationship and the bond there that is just non-existent today. You got parents out here who are scared of their children. You got grandparents out here who are scared of these children walking the streets. I remember my great grandmother was so gangster. All the hood dudes in the community respect her. So I grew up in a community in Mississippi, Jackson specifically. I lived out west. Out west means something. You know what I mean? It's like, you from out west, you from out north, you from out south. But being from out west and out south, like that really means something. So my grandmother grew up in an area called the Sub. With my great grandmother, but I call her grandma. But she grew up in the area of Jackson called the Sub 2 specifically. Yeah, like the guys just be walking the streets and like they would speak. They would speak to my grandma. They'd be like, "Hey, Miss Jenny, how you doing?" She'll speak back to them and stuff. If they was sagging their pants, she wasn't going. Pull your pants up. Pull your damn pants up. My great grandmama wasn't going. But that's just the type of respect she had out there. Like, they knew her. So they knew that she commanded a certain level of respect and that you needed to have a certain level of respect for yourself as well. That's just who she was. That's just the type of, we call it motion today, but that's just the type of motion that she had. You know what I'm saying? Like, there wasn't going to be any disrespect being tolerated, none of that. You weren't going to do that when you was in her presence. Like, you had to straighten up and you had to fly right. I'll never forget, I had he wasn't my neighbor, but he was my grandmother's neighbor. And I don't know what type of stuff he was involved in, but I could just tell, like, I saw him growing up until he eventually became a man. And he was rough around the edges. Like, he had some edge to him, and he was doing some stuff that he shouldn't have been doing. But one thing that he didn't do, and this is another thing that's lost on our community today as well, he didn't bring that to the community. There was never a time to where my grandmama saw him doing something that he wasn't supposed to be doing. He didn't do that in the community because he had so much respect for her. So he didn't do it around her, right? But, he still did whatever he wanted to do wherever he was doing it at. I just know with him living right next door to my great grandmother, he did not do that stuff around her. But sometimes just because you're doing those things does not mean that element won't follow you to wherever it is that you live or wherever it is that you lay your head. And that is one of the more unfortunate incidents, one of the more unfortunate things that happens in our community. There was a time to where if you saw a grandmother in a community, you saw an older lady, grandmother, grandparents, there was so much respect for them that let's say that you had a problem or an issue with somebody, you knew better than to try to solve it right there, because the old school grandparents were different. They'll end up and solve that problem for you before you trying to solve it. Like, they just didn't play that. Whoever it was, let's say you were beefing with somebody, both of y'all gonna get a whooping or something. Something is gonna happen to where I'm not gonna come around here and do that foolishness around them. I'm just not going to do it because they would handle you, and it didn't matter. They didn't care how they would handle you either. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, they did that because there was love there. The community aspect, like they were the foundational pillars of our community. So they were going to fix both of y'all. Whatever the issue was, they were going to fix both of y'all issues. Whatever it was with one another, they were going to fix that. Then there was going to be some type of conversation or something had to try to figure out what was the problem. Could the problem be fixed? Could the problem be solved? If the problem could not be fixed or solved, they just literally told you, don't come back over to this community, whatever, like that, so-and-so, so-and-so. And most times, and oftentimes, they respected that. Like, there was no pushback, there wasn't no feedback, there wasn't no talking back, none of that. They heard that, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, and they move on about their business. But those just are not the times that we are living in today. So, just to finish the story, I'll never forget, there was one time where the guy that I'm talking to you about that lived next door to my great-grandmother, he got shot. And he got shot in that community. And again, my great-grandmama lives right next door to him. You know, when we found it out, it was pretty much on the hush-hush for the most part. My grandmama found out eventually. I don't know how she didn't hear it or whatever. But she eventually found out shortly after. And, you know, I'm sure that there was a conversation had and, you know, what's going on, this, and this. But one thing he did, he apologized to my mama. You know, I'm sorry for bringing this type of trouble out here, you know, next door. And, you know, I really apologize. You know how much I love her. You know how much I care about her, all that. So, you know, he apologized. He was super apologetic because he just knew he had so much respect for my great-grandmother that, you know, bullets ain't got no names on them, so they can go anywhere and everywhere. That's just the type of respect and just the type of person that he was, to where he knew not to bring no issues or drama out there to where it could possibly have an adverse effect on her. You know, he eventually died. He had some form of cancer that he eventually died from. But I'll never forget, when my grandmother was going down, he was always asking about her because me and my sister would be going to her house, checking up on the house, doing stuff around the house, making sure that it looked the way that it was supposed to, that it appeared that someone was still living there. Because, you know, at this time, people are breaking into houses, trying to see what they can find and all this other type of jazz. But every time we saw him before, he says, man, how your grandmama doing? Tell her I said, hey, tell her I'm going to come see her. Tell her I'm thinking about her. Tell her I'm asking about her. How she doing? She good? She doing all right? Oh, that's good to hear. Stuff like that, you know? So the community plays a vital part and a vital role in who we as black men eventually grow up to be. And unfortunately, we just don't have that today. But I truly feel like we can get back to that. It's just about figuring out how we can make our way back, how we can rectify what the community looks like to us as black men, and how we can, you know, uplift and motivate and change what that looks like. You know, everyone likes to talk about Nipsey Hussle and how Nipsey Hussle was for the community and stuff like that. And he absolutely was. He made nothing out of something and became, you know, an integral part of his community, giving opportunities, giving jobs, giving back, doing all the things that you want, you know, a pivotal figure in your community to be. But then that same community end up taking him away from his family and his kids. And that's just the story of the black community in general, of our communities. It's hard to try to go back and reside in our communities because if someone ain't doing better than you, they're going to try to figure out a way to get on that level, to either try to get what you have or to take what you have. I don't know where that mentality came from in our communities and in our neighborhoods, but hopefully it's something that, you know, we can rid the community of and try to find that love again that we once had. So I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but I feel like it's very relevant to the trial and everything that I've seen thus far. So hopefully we can get back to that at some point. Respect is a foreign concept, and when it is not cultivated early, it becomes non-existent when kids become adults. If emotional intelligence is not learned early, it leads to Moonk pointing a huge gun at a camera phone, threatening Shell kill because he and Moonk were dealing with the same woman, for an example. If you don't know who Moonk is someone who Thug used to hang out with, also ran with Thug. Moonk was dealing with this girl, and one of his op was dealing with the girl at the same time. Moonk had been dealing with her longer, and the other guy came along at some point, and maybe he was just trying to sow some dissension, or maybe he was just trying to, be petty and just cause issues when there didn't need to be any, and then things escalate. And I think that guy ended up getting killed. Well, he absolutely got killed. No, I think his big brother was killed. I think he might still be alive. But yeah, Moonk just had his 5 years of his probation revoked. So he's going to be in jail for the next 5 years. Moonk is 42 years old and will not get out of jail until he's 47. Lack of emotional intelligence is important. Lack of emotional intelligence leads to a car of men, black men, shooting at Lil Woody. Lil Woody is viral, so if you don't know who Lil Woody is, you can Google Lil Woody, YouTube Lil Woody, and you'll see who he is. Lack of emotional intelligence leads to a car of men shooting at Lil Woody while his baby mama and child were in the car. And Lil Woody decides to hold his child to protect his child. He thought he was protecting his child, but obviously he was. I mean, that's just a fatherly instinct that kicks in. But Lil Woody was holding his child, trying to shield his child while he was shooting back at the man. It is very clear that on top of the generational trauma their parents did not heal from, along with the conditions black families experience while living in the ghetto, children will get creative to find pathways to seek and make money through illicit means to alleviate the pressures of what is occurring inside of the home. Becoming a product of your environment is a lot easier than some would imagine. I'm not sure how we heal the generations of inequality in our community, but we need to figure that out so that we can catch young black men in their formative years before they become adults embroiled in a life of crime. While Thug has been released from prison, some of his co-defendants have been given plea deals where they will serve time and will be out early enough to rectify their lives. Shannon Stillwell, a.k.a. SB, and Diamante Kendrick, a.k.a. Yak Gotti, are still on trial fighting for their lives. There are no actual winners in this situation. However, it is a fact that Young Thug did not have a criminal record before this trial. Speaking for myself personally, I am glad to see him out and free because of how blatant the state was with trying to railroad him. We'll see what happens next in this trial. Those are the 3 things that I personally learned watching 154 days of this trial. I think that's a pretty good breakdown and a pretty good summary of what this trial is all about without going through the whole rigmarole of all 154 days and trying to break those down so that you guys can understand what's happening. I feel like this is something that everyone can learn from, and I feel like it's an accurate depiction of pretty much what happened in the trial. So please let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions. Again, I'm on all social media at Sip My Thoughts. You can find me there. I'm on all streaming platforms. If you want the audio version of this pod, you can find me at the Sip My Thoughts pod, THESIP my thoughts, THOUGHTS the Sip My Thoughts pod. If you want to email me, give me your thoughts and opinions, sipmythoughts@gmail.com. You can find me there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. Please continue to support. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe. If you also looking for the written version, you can find me on Medium and subscribe to Sip My Thoughts. I'm on there as well. And that way I can play the whole entirety of the interview so you can see them for yourselves and listen to some of the other questions that we're being asked also. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. Till next time. Peace.